Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of an unexpected podcast, Shorts. So this is our second short, I think, ever. We've had a nice little 3-month break in there, as is necessary, but we're back again. I'm Evan. I've got with me Matt and Rob, and we are just going to do a couple of quick things. We're going to start off with a little list review and then go over a couple of tournaments slightly briefly and then maybe talk about some future tournaments that we're going to go to. So let's kick this off. Dad, you want to post the list on the screen for
Yep.
us?
All right.
Yeah, we took a short break from the shorts.
Yes, a short one. Definitely.
Well, isn't any break we take from the shorts a short break? Like by
Don't worry,
definition?
we'll pump
not
another
short.
one. We'll pump another one of these out in the next 6 months.
Yep. All right. So this is a list by CT. He said he's going to a 600. This is a 600 point fellowship fiefdoms list or fiefdoms list. I always get that wrong. Yellow Alliance, and he has Gandalf the Grey on horse from the Fellowship, Angbor the Fearless, 3 Knights of Del Amroth, 3 Blackroot Vale archers with spears, 3 men-at-arms, 1 man-at-arm with banner, 4 clansmen of Lamadon, 1 Knight of Del Amroth on armored horse with a lance. Then he also has Dwyn here, 3 Knights of Del Amroth, 2 Blackroot Vale archers, 2 men-at-arms, 4 clansmen of Lamadon, and 1 Knight of Del Amroth on armored horse with a lance. Comes out to 30 models, 599 points, and 7 might. So, and his concept here is to have 2 small, 3 wide phalanxes, 2 men-at-arms, 1 with banner, floating in between, and a hammer anvil tactics with the clansmen of Lamadon and Knights of Del Amroth, and Gandalf just sits back doing Gandalfy things. I guess, playing with hobbits and, accidentally dropping tree limbs on people. So
Lots of
all right.
smoking.
Spoilers.
Yes. So anyway, thoughts on this? Turn it over to the field.
I don't know about this one, Chief. I feel like if you're gonna take Gandalf in an army, fiefdoms, first off, fiefdoms is not the first thing I think of. But also it feels like it's a little too low on points, at least from my perspective. So I definitely don't see it performing super well. But I feel
When you
like
say it's a
the
little
big
too low on points, why don't you break that down a bit and talk about what you mean?
so Gandalf costs a low 180 points, which in this particular circumstances is 1/3 of your entire army. The issue with this is twofold. One, Gandalf the Grey doesn't hit very hard. He doesn't do a lot of he has no way of really killing heroes because of his one attack. He transfixes them and then hopes that other guys kill them for him. And 2, he can't really chop through troops either because of that said one attack. So he's not going to be killing much. And he also does not allow for you to get many numbers in your army, seeing as he's so many points. He's taking up a lot of your spots for extra models and extra more hitty heroes. So a big thing you want to take with a wizard is something that can actually capitalize on the wizard doing wizard tricks. So for example, if Gandalf the Grey gets a transfix on a model, how are you going to capitalize on that model? How are you going to kill that model? And Angbor and Dwyn here, I feel, are not quite up to the task in that particular circumstance.
Well,
Because
let's talk about, I was going to say, talk about why.
Well, yes, I was going into why.
All right.
And so Angbor is all right. He's not awful at killing models. He does have his two-handed weapon, which is nice. but he's only got 2 attacks. So, and he's not mounted as well, which is another big thing. Because Gandalf is probably blasting a guy off of his horse. So you really want a mounted hero to be able to charge in, knock that model down, and just kill it in one. And Angbor and Dwinhir are not going to be able to do that. So honestly, this list is a little tough for me to figure out a way to get the most out of this. But I think if you were to do anything, and while this isn't the most money effective way to do things, I think a mounted forlong would help out a lot, to be able to actually kill stuff that Gandalf the Grey shuts down because of his strength 5 lance and just killing power in general. It would definitely be helpful, though I'm not sure.
So how many
Yeah,
points is a mounted forlong? I was trying to look that up while you were talking.
He's
Yeah,
about it.
95, right? With his horse.
I think he's only 90
Maybe
with
he's
his
just
horse.
90. It's 90 or
Ang
95.
Angbor is like 60, 65 or something like that. So you're dropping more guys,
Right.
which is another problem, which is compounded by the fact that this army already does not have a large amount of numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Ron.
I agree with Evan in the sense that I'm looking at an army that doesn't really have any threats, right? You don't have a hero that is really threatening. Angbor is at best okay. You don't have enough Blackroot Vale archers to really capitalize on their potential shooting power, so it's not really that scary from a shooting perspective. So it's a lot of grindy models, which Fiefdoms does well, but usually Fiefdoms is grindy with a couple of really strong heroes behind them that can do work, and none of those heroes are really present here. So Gandalf is a great control piece, but he doesn't really have a luxury to just sit back and do Gandalf things in this list because he needs to pull more weight. And I wonder, kind of going off of what you said, Evan, if the answer isn't, and if you want to kind of keep the Gandalf theme, isn't just to upgrade Gandalf the Grey to the White and give him a warband of Minas Tirith, and then take Forlong on horse with a full warband of fiefdoms. You're gonna lose 1 might. You're gonna keep the same amount of models probably, but you're gonna have 2 mounted threats, someone to help the wizard out if he's doing casty things rather than fighty things, and generally the same distribution of kind of grindy troops and shooting that you have now, because you're not really capitalizing on Dwinhir's abilities that much in this list. So that's kind of my take on exactly what you were saying, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not make drastic changes to this list, unfortunately, because it just, and none of us mean any offense when we say this, but it just doesn't really do anything well, except sort of have that control aspect with Gandalf the Grey. And when you're making a list, you need that control aspect plus something else to be able to win games. And you've got that control aspect, but you don't have the hitting power. You're not really going to be out shooting anybody, even though you've got blinding light, because you've got like 6 archers in total, so you
Yeah, I
don't
think it's
really
like
offer that
5,
much of a
right?
threat.
Yeah.
5 plus Dwinhir.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, your warriors are going to crumple in combat, because usually fiefdoms benefits from the fight value buff from Imrahil and the banner buff from Imrahil. You have neither of those things. So unfortunately, the result is a list with a cool model, Gandalf the Grey, but with lackluster heroes, lackluster troops that they also don't get Angbor the Fearless's benefit, the Fearless bubble, because of the convenient allies. So unfortunately, it just doesn't accomplish much. So if you're set on using a list like this, then absolutely go ahead. If this is what you want to play and if this is what you enjoy. But I think either going with some Gandalf the White Minas Tirith list or just fiefdoms without Gandalf the Grey, unfortunately, are probably better options, I'd say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when Evan's talking about a support hero, he's talking about somebody who does not win you the game by killing other models. He wins you the game by either preventing other models from killing you or helping somebody else in the army kill other models. And every point that you devote to a support hero like that is, one that kind of comes off of your list of stuff that actually kills your opponent. And there's a limit to the proportion of your army points that you can devote to that. And I try and keep that at no higher than 20%, although I will occasionally break that rule in specific circumstances, which, maybe we'll talk about a little later when we're talking about recent tournament stuff. But Gandalf the Grey at 180 points is a big chunk. It's almost a third of the 600-point army. And he's probably not going to directly kill more than a couple models during the game. And 180 points on a guy that's probably not going to kill more than a couple models is a big reach, especially if you're going to play fiefdoms, even just getting Imrahil in here, who's, obviously the premier model for this list, it's 20 points cheaper. And if you put Imrahil in this list, he gives all sorts of bonuses to everybody in this list, including, banners and fight value upgrades, and makes Angbor's bonus make everybody fearless. So, I think at this points level, if you're going to play fiefdoms, just play fiefdoms. And Gandalf the Grey isn't the guy you want to put in. If you're going to play Gandalf the Grey at this points level, you really need to be putting him into a list that has very cheap warriors. So, the Gandalf the Grey with the Shire option is one way to do it, with a whole bunch of hobbits, where you're like, I've got 600 points of hobbits and there's a gazillion of them. Or the Gandalf the Grey with Survivors of Lake Town can also work at this points level, because there's a bunch of Survivors of Lake Town. They're relatively cheap. And there's enough oomph there to support, because you can still get a decent amount of warriors and by somebody like Bard, who can actually kill something when Gandalf transfixes him or Sorceress blasts him off of his horse. If I were you going with this one, I would throw Imrahil in here, and maybe even, you might want to do Imrahil, and maybe even take Dwinhir out of this list and use all those extra points to buy guys. I suspect one of two things could happen. You would either fill up those warbands with Imrahil and Angbor, or you could upgrade Angbor to Forlorn the Fat, and get a few more guys into this. Dwinhir, keep in mind, if you are going to use Dwinhir is really only effective when he's near a bunch of Blackroot Vale archers. There are only 5 Blackroot Vale archers in this list, and they're in 2 different warbands, so the majority of them are not going to be near him. And really, this is Dwinhir is not one of those heroes who wants to have a combined arms warband. Dwinhir is one of those heroes because so many of his benefits are bubble effects that affect his archers, where he's calling heroic shoots within a certain distance of these guys. And I can't remember exactly I think it's they reroll ones to hit or something when they're stationary within 6 inches or 3 inches of him. He really wants a warband of Blackroot Vale archers to get his points out of, because he's not that impressive a hero on his own, not really going to kill anybody. So he needs a bunch of archers to really make this work. So, I think I might take Gandalf the Grey and try adding him in for a slightly larger list, replace him with Imrahil, buy 20 points more troops, and then maybe change Dwyn here to something else, either Forlong or upgrade Angbor to Forlong and just throw all the rest of the points you can into troops at this level. Because I think Imrahil's can give you 18, Forlong can give you 15. That's 33 right there. I think that's probably worth it.
Well, and if you go with the Imrahil option, you could also drop the banner off the Man-at-Arms. I know it's useful for scenario, but if you're trying to get more models, you're still going to get that banner effect.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the real question is, viewer, is the fiefdoms part more important to you, or is the Gandalf part more important to you, or both, right? And depending on how you answer that question, I either agree, go with Imrahil and focus on fiefdoms. If Gandalf's the important part, either switch him to the white and kind of mix him with fiefdoms, or frankly, you know, throw in some survivors or some hobbits or something to get more out of him. But depending on how you answer that question, I would modify as both Evan and Matt kind of said.
Yeah, I think, by the way, I think Gandalf the White at 600 points is just not going to work.
No, but if you're going to keep Gandalf, absolutely, that's the most important thing to you. And fiefdoms, I really don't think there's any other way to do it.
Yeah, that's fair. But you know, Gandalf the White is even more expensive, and he is hittier than Gandalf the Grey because of that extra attack. But that's still, then you're sinking more than a third of your points into a wizard, and that's awfully expensive.
No, I don't disagree with that. The thinking there is, if you want Gandalf and you want fiefdoms, because he's so expensive, you drop the third hero and you just go with someone like Forlong. And Dwyn here isn't really doing much, to your point. So use some of those points to upgrade Gandalf, use some of those points for more troops, and you're effectively getting the same list, except you're getting far more points efficient D6 Warriors of Minas Tirith out of it. You're getting the fight for behind them from the fiefdoms troops. You're a green alliance, so you're getting both of the benefits thereof, right? So if it's crucial that you keep both of those pieces, that's really the only way I can see to do it. The gray just doesn't fit into that equation for me.
Yep. All right.
I think this list offers a great case study on sort of how to use yellow alliances, because often people will go this way when they're making a yellow alliance. They'll go, okay, I have the freedom to add, you know, whatever heroes and warriors I want together. And sometimes you'll see lists like this where you've got Gandalf in with fiefdoms, or sometimes you'll just see like a mishmash of different models that don't necessarily work together. And I think a good rule of thumb, and one I almost always use when building yellow alliances, is to basically make sure my initial army is solid first, and then add on some sort of model that doesn't actively hinder the army, but instead compounds on the strengths and maybe adds another layer of depth to the army. So for example, if you were, say, taking Imrahil first and then making sure that you've got the banner reroll everywhere and whatnot, now you've taken you've gotten the strengths of the fiefdoms and have been able to solidify that sort of army concept and idea. Then once you've got Imrahil and you've got a decent fiefdoms army, you can consider allying in some sort of yellow ally that won't actively hurt your army, but will instead help your army. And I think taking Gandalf instead of a model from this list, in this case being Imrahil, actively hinders the army without helping it enough to be able to make it effective.
Yeah, and I actually generally find fiefdoms are a poor candidate for yellow alliances, just because they have such great buffs and such great allies to choose from that are green. So obviously you can always find some kind of, you know, wonky Forlong plus troops that fit into a yellow alliance, but fiefdoms are really strong, and they have great green allies. So I usually don't look to yellow with them.
Yep, that's true. Okay. All right. Well, CT, hopefully this helped you, and hopefully you're not kind of turned off by this. But this is this is a list combination that you may want to wait until you go to a 700 or 800 point level to try out. And certainly when you get to the 800 point level, I think Gandalf the White might be a good option for this. And hopefully it'll work out. So
Mhm.
let's see. I'm going to stop sharing.
Let's move on to tournaments, shall we? So we've had a couple of recent ones. Um, and I know Rob, you're planning on going to one as well, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple on the docket, so to speak. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I think first on the chopping block was that's ArmorCon, right, Dad?
Yeah,
The one that
ArmorCon.
Alex ran.
Yep.
Yeah, so we got actually quite a good turnout this year. Last year we had about 6 people. Obviously, COVID and stuff got in the way of it. But this year we doubled in size. So we ended up having 12 people. It was a great time. We saw a decent number of new players actually, um, and a lot of newer players as well. So it was a really fun experience for all of us. Um, Dad, would you like to start off with your experience and what you brought, how you did that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to go blow by blow
No,
with
no,
games,
not
especially
not
since
game by game.
I don't really remember them, or at least that not that cogently, because we then went to another tournament the week afterwards.
Yes.
But
Just the overall experience.
yeah, so I decided I'm going to take Assault on Lothlorien. So I was playing that, and
Old cheese.
yeah, and it certainly is, kind of working out the way I intended it to, and it is definitely a very strong list. One thing that I learned kind of during the course of that tournament and some other games I've been playing with it is Assault on Lothlorien does have a weakness that I don't think we fully identified when we were talking about it. And I think it may be, I mean, I don't want to call it an Achilles heel because you can still kind of win against this type of army with Assault on Lothlorien. But the army that Assault on Lothlorien doesn't want to face is an army of fight 3 or perhaps 4 if you can get them, um, strength 4, defense 6 troops, and in numbers. And the armies that kind of make those up are like like a Moranador horde, or a horde of Gundabads, or Gundabads and some Hunter Orcs. And I played up against Avery a couple times, and they were both very hard matches with that particular list. And what that brings is the ability to win fights. First of all, you're tough enough to deal with the throwing weapons and actually close, even with the +1 to wound that they're getting. And then once you get in, if you win a fight, you can pretty much take down, you got a 50-50 shot at least of each wound. And if you got a spear line, you're probably going to take down, as long as you win a fight, you're going to take down the goblin that's in front of you. And those are scary matches for Assault on Lothlorien. And you really have to play to get them maximized. You really have to maximize kind of your spiders and your creepy crawlies and your spells. And in particular, you got to kind of lure the enemy army into kill sacks where your missile weapons can kind of thin out the numbers before they get in contact with you. Because if you just slam head to head into one of those armies, they've got enough numbers to kind of match your front line 1-to-1. So you're not going to be getting +1 to wounds, and you will be dying faster than they will. And they can have enough numbers so that they can almost match you in numbers. And then when they start racking up the kills in close combat, they can take you down. So that was kind of one of my lessons from that particular tournament.
Yeah, for sure.
And you were playing Helm's Guard, Evan. How did that go?
Yeah. I ended up I decided that I was going to not go down the evil route this time. Stay away from the Angmar, stay away from the weird good alliance cheese, and I decided to take a more fun list, I guess. One can put it as, which was Helm's Guard. Um, so it was basically just Helm, a couple of captains, and then a bunch of guys with throwing spears. And I went into it not really having a plan of how to play. And I came out of it really respecting how well the just the basic warriors can do and hold up. Um, Throughout the entirety of the tournament, my throwing weapons, I think, barely did anything. Um,
Which is odd
uh,
because you had a lot of throwing weapons in that.
I did
Didn't
have many
everybody have a
throwing
throwing
weapons.
weapon?
Pretty much, except the captains in Helm and my outriders, which I had 3 of. But other than that, I think I had like 36 throwing weapons or something like that. And they did not do too well. Yeah, my first game was against Iron Hills, and they didn't do anything there because
Mm.
obviously it's Iron Hills. And then my next game was against you, where neither of our throwing weapons were doing a particularly great job, at least when charging into combat. Though your goblin shooting was doing quite well, I think. But none
Well,
of our
I
throwing
got the
weapons were
+1 to
good.
wound and you don't. So that was
Mm.
probably the the source of
Even
that
then,
differential.
I was wounding on 5s. Did not work out. And then the last game, I think I actually had one turn where my throwing weapons actually did fairly well, where I got something like 3 or 4 kills. But other than that, um, I was not overly impressed with them. Um, but Helm is very good. I'd recommend him at least at lower points levels. I think once you start hitting a lot of fight 5, like elves and whatnot, it becomes quite problematic to use him just because you can't reliably call your free heroic combats anymore, and you have to spend your mighty hero to heroic strike. Um, but I feel like especially at lower points, Helm's Guard is quite a powerful list, and I would recommend it. It's quite enjoyable to play.
Did you miss not taking any Royal Guard? Because I know that that was kind of a debate, at
I
least recently on the podcast.
took 3 of them.
Okay.
And I think in some circumstances I would have liked them. Against Iron Hills, I think
Hmm.
definitely I would have preferred Royal Guard. Um, Against Assault upon Lothlorien, I think also Royal Guard being able to spread the fight 4 everywhere and
Hmm.
having defense 6 would be very important
I,
as
I
well,
mean,
at least
I
against
have
the
to
throwing
say,
weapons.
I'm not sure the increased points you would have paid for them would have paid off because the
Mm, well,
one of the things that was problematic against me was just how many figures there were in your
Hmm.
army. I mean, you almost had the same number of figures that I did,
I
just
mean,
because you kind of
you can
spammed out the
replicate
regular
that
guys.
decently if you don't take throwing spears on the Royal Guard. That's like the big thing. If because that's something I'm considering now because of how horribly the throwing spears did, is to just do backline throwing spear guys, frontline Royal Guard without throwing spears. Um, but that in turn sort of takes away a little bit of the threat of the throwing spears because obviously you're dropping like 16 of them
Hmm.
in favor of Royal Guard.
Well,
But
and at
it's
that point,
definitely,
you're also the ones that you're taking feel a little more overpriced if you're just taking them to be spears, right?
yeah.
Because if they're
I mean, you
backliners.
can get some throws in from a distance, but yeah, it it definitely it is sometimes that way, and I think that's part of the problem is your spearmen will most likely not be doing that much throwing and will instead just be spear supporting, and at that point you've spent 2 points for a effectively a 1 point upgrade, which is a challenge in that particular area. So I think Royal Guard are definitely an interesting option and something I will probably explore more.
Mhm.
So the other tournament we went to was one down at Mythicos Studios down in Mahwah, New Jersey, and we went there the weekend afterwards. So we did like 2 weekends of back-to-back tournaments. This was a another one-day tournament. This was a a good and evil tournament. So you brought down one list of each, or at least you had the option to, and then you get to choose. You'd roll off to see who chose good or evil, and then you'd play. For this one, I ended up bringing down. I brought down Assault on Lothlorien again, slightly lower points level. I had 700 points at Paths of the Dead and 650 for this tournament, so it was a slightly smaller list. I ended up one of the other things that my initial thought was I was going to get rid of the shaman because I wasn't concerned about Fury and keep the captain. After I went through my first tournament with it at Paths of the Dead, I realized how effective having that second. It's the second transfix in the list from the shaman, which is really kind of the primary use for the shaman if in a situation where you don't need Fury. And I got so used to playing Moria where you never cast transfix because it was a 5-up and you were never going to get it. When you start re-rolling dice, that 5-up transfix is actually effective. And especially if you still have a point of might in the tank, you got a pretty decent chance with 2 rolls of getting at least a 4 on one of them to get that second transfix off. And nobody sees that second transfix coming in that list. So, Musger will fire, he's probably soaked off a point of will or 2 from the key critical hero already trying to resist withers. And then he gets into the critical combat. Musger will fire off the transfix. The guy will spend whatever will he has left in the tank to resist that. And then you go, aha, but I also have a shaman. And the shaman will come up and, pump even just 1 point of will at a transfix if he's still got that point of might and get a pretty decent shot of getting it off against that hero without will. So I ended up going down there with keeping the shaman and forgetting the captain, and it worked out just fine. Even though we had a couple of mobility scenarios. The other list I took was, I told you that rule about not spending more than 20% of points on support heroes. This was one that violated that. I was thinking to myself, what would I want to counter kind of these tricksy evil lists like Assault on Lothlorien and something else? And I was like, how about, I mean, obviously I want Galadriel, Lady of Light for the blinding light and the ability to banish when necessary, but to get her, I need another White Council hero. So how about Saruman? So Saruman and Galadriel, Lady of Light, together are 310 points. It gives me 340 points. What kind of effective army can I put together with 340 points? So of course I went with Army of Lake Town, and I did the Master Braga Alfred combination with a bunch of dudes. So I took that down, and Saruman is definitely a support hero. I don't think Galadriel, Lady of Light is, because she can fight and kill stuff and has a strike, and so I don't think she falls into that category. But Saruman definitely does. But the reason I was comfortable, or at least I was willing to go above that, or commit so many points in 180 points out of a 650 list into a support character, is because he has that Sorceress Blast. So he can actually reliably kill stuff in addition to tamping down big heroes and things like that.
And just to compare this to Gandalf, a reminder that Gandalf casts Sorcerer's Blast on a 5-up.
Yep.
And he gets no rerolls or anything like that. Saruman casts it on a 4-up, and he gets to reroll 1 die every time. And for reference, Gandalf using 2 dice to try and cast Sorcerer's Blast is quite less likely to happen than Saruman just throwing 1 free die at a Sorcerer's Blast.
Yep. And originally I was really on the fence because my other build was just going to be pure Army of Lake Town, and I was going to throw it. If you get rid of Galadriel and Saruman, you can throw in Bard and his daughters and Bane and an entire extra warband of guys and fill out all the rest of the warbands, and you can have like a somewhere between like a 58 and 61 figure army at 650 points with all of that stuff in it. And that was the other one I was thinking about taking, because I was like, and I kept on going back and forth because I was like, ooh, numbers. But then I go, but I want the tricks.
Yeah.
And then I look and go, oh, look at all these tricks, but I want the numbers. I ended up going with the tricks, and boy, was I happy I did that, because my first round draw was against a guy who was playing 3 Gorgoroth beasts. So it was the army was 3 Gorgoroth beasts and a Shadow Lord, and Saruman and Galadriel looked at each other and said, "We got this." And not only that, but we were on a board that was just populated with buildings, so it was basically just Saruman playing Gorgoroth beast pinball the entire game. So, and we were also playing, I think, Clash by Moonlight, so my archers were getting +1 to wound on the Gorgoroth beasts, so all sorts of horrific things were happening to those Gorgoroth beasts. There was, in fact, there was one guy who, I shot at the turn before, did a wound, and he rolled something low on his courage test, so it was going to be stampeding. So of course I stampeded into a building. The poor thing took 3 wounds and had 2 left, and Saruman goes, "Oh, you're not dead yet? Compel!" And it just whammed into the same building again, and that killed it. So yeah. So anyway, it ended up working out. I took Assault on Lothlorien for the other 2 lists. But actually, before we get on to Evan, there's one thing I want to raise, because I did play a really fun game against Alisher. Alisher Asimov's a really good player here from Pennsylvania. He was up there, and so I was playing my Assault on Lothlorien in a domination game against his Survivors of Laketown list. He had Gandalf, and Gandalf cast Blinding Light, of course. And the question got raised, how you deal with the, I mean, obviously we know what happens about everybody within 6 inches of Gandalf. You need to roll a 6 to hit. So that's fine. And then the question got raised about the effect of the illumination zone, which, for those who don't know, if you cast Blinding Light, this is something Galadriel doesn't give off, but if you cast Blinding Light, it does. It turns everything within 12 inches into daylight. So the question was, what effect does that have on the +1 to wound?
Dodging arrows. Yeah.
The ability to dodge arrows that causes the +1 to wound that's supposed to affect all shooting. And I'm going to raise this to the forum. We could not figure out what the answer was supposed to be, and eventually we just rolled a die to decide what it should be. I need to post this on the GBHL and other places and see what the answer they put out is, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. So there's 3 possible categories here, because we all know what happens if neither the target nor the shooter are illuminated. Then it's just the standard rule, right? You need to be within 12 inches unless you're a goblin, and then you get +1 to wound. So category 1 is shooter is illuminated, target is not. Category number 2 is shooter is not illuminated, target is. And then category 3 is both shooter and target are illuminated. And we both agreed that, because I think it's pretty clear in the way it's been interpreted at various points, that if both the shooter and the target are illuminated, there's no +1 to wound, because it's just you're shooting in daylight. The question was, what happens in the other 2 circumstances? Because this happened a lot in both directions, where shooter is illuminated, target is not, or target is illuminated, shooter is not. What are your thoughts? When does the +1 apply in those circumstances?
So I'd say, at least thinking from a degree of common sense standpoint, as the FAQs like to say, I would personally rule it that if the shooter is illuminated, they would not get the +1. But if the target and only the target is illuminated, they would, simply because if you can see the guy who's firing, you can dodge the arrow. But if you can't see the guy who's firing, then you don't have time to dodge the arrow. But honestly, there are so many different ways you can look at this situation. So if I were to be asked to make a ruling, I don't think I'd really be able to make a definite ruling on that. And I think it's definitely something that needs to be FAQ'd.
Rob, what's your thought on this contentious issue?
I mean, pretty much the same as Evan, right? I mean, using the very surefire rule of common sense. That is also the way that I would
That
interpret
applies
it.
to this situation, which actually has nothing to do with
Right.
reality.
If I was to ride my dragon into a saloon and come up against the situation, right? But mechanically, I think what Evan said is kind of the interpretation I'd go with, but I would really prefer to see it ruled on officially, to be honest.
All right, so that's fair. We ended up rolling. We ended up rolling basically for both categories of situation, and it came up good both times. So I got no +1s if either the target or the shooter was eliminated. But I'm going to put that up and see what people think. I don't pretend to know the answer to it, because the common sense theory really I don't think applies here, because the idea of being able to see arrows coming and dodging them out of the way is just not common sense.
This also kind of got muddled by the FAQ to Cave Dweller as well, right? Whereas that adds an extra layer to it and then Assault on Lothlorien came by, so suddenly everyone's fighting at night all the time, because otherwise this was such an edge case, it never really came up, right?
Right. So all right. So yeah, so okay. All right. Interesting answer. I'll put that up and we'll see what we get. So Evan, you tell us about your experience at the Mythicos tournament. How did your army do?
Yeah, so I took my good army was Helmsguard again because I decided I wanted to keep playing that. And before the tournament, honestly, I could not come up with an evil army that I actually wanted to play. I was thinking of Angmar, but I I felt like I had played so much Angmar that I didn't really want to play it anymore. So as a entirely last minute decision, I decided I would instead be playing Pits of Dol Guldur, which is an army that I had played once before in my entire life. That was basically, I started playing it as soon as the army came out. And so it was like maybe a week or two afterwards, I played my one game with it, and then I never played it before. Played it after rather. So I did not really know what to do with it, but I'm like, you know what? This seems similar to Helmsguard in some respects, where it's got a big mega hero. Let's see how it goes. Um, and luckily for me, that ended up being a good decision, because in all three of my games, I ended up playing just Pits of Dol Guldur and not playing Helmsguard whatsoever. And I managed to win all three of my games. So I guess Pits of Dol Guldur is broken. You heard it here. Um, but I think I learned quite a few things from playing Pits. First off is that taking Azog like that is a huge risk, as I saw in my first game where he just died fighting basic Rohan warriors. Just every time he went into combat, he would botch and have to burn might, as the Rohan warrior would roll a 6 and he'd roll like a 5 or something like that. And then eventually he ran out of steam, and then all it took was one set of strikes against his defense 5 and he just died. Um, so that was quite a learning experience. But also I think the most powerful part of the list, and something that you cannot at all underestimate, is the ability to move first no matter what. Because that, I think it's called ambush special rule or something like that, where you basically get priority automatically and your opponent cannot call any heroic moves to deal with it. Not only does it have huge psychological pressure on your opponent, because it basically forces them to never get to a point where they're severely out of position, because then you can just take advantage of that immediately. But it can also just put your opponent in almost checkmate positions in some ways. For example, in my first game, we were playing Hold Ground, and my opponent moved his Rohan guys basically up to a choke point, and he was planning on heroic moving through next turn, spreading out and fighting me in a big engagement. And I just said nope, and I called that special rule, and I basically walled his entire army off from the objective for the entirety of the game, just because I stopped him in that choke point. And then a small portion of his army was on a different the other side of the objective, and I killed that portion. But the main part of his army just really didn't get to play the game at all. And that was all down to that special rule. So for people both playing that army and playing against that army, be careful of that special rule because it can be game changing.
Yeah, it's a wicked rule. It's a Palantir on steroids, and it's the can't counter with heroic moves part that just absolutely zonks your opponent.
It honestly, it's what the Palantir should be, I
Mhm.
think. Because like if Saruman had the Palantir that had that effect, he would be taken much more and I think feared much more.
I mean, before that rule came along, the Palantir was considered great, right? Like an automatic priority, not
Yeah.
like a modifier, nothing. Like it's great, and then this comes along, and it's like throw the rock away, right?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
the Palantir was only ever useful when one side was out of might.
Yes.
And
50% of the time it wasn't even useful
Yeah.
because you
Exactly.
might have won priority anyways.
Mhm.
And you always waited until the opponent was basically out of might, like Dad said, because otherwise your opponent would just call a heroic move and you'd have a move roll off and then you would have accomplished absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And this special
Well,
rule
but this
is
is
much more
also
widely applicable, and I think provides a lot more of a threat. Not saying that the Palantir was bad in any way, shape, or form.
no. I'm just saying the Palantir was kind of great in its time, right? Because this was also a time when Isengard didn't have Assault on Helm's Deep and stuff, where you saw Saruman a lot more, and he was leading armies, and he just got it for free. It's not something you had to buy.
The
So
Palantir
like,
was so 2010s.
you know, it was so last edition.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, no, it's a great rule. One thing that interests me, since Evan, obviously you went to a good v evil tournament and played evil 3 times. This system, and I've seen it crop up a lot in the States. I don't know offhand if they do it in the UK and other places as well, where you bring good and evil, but kind of have a choice on what to play and can end up playing one army multiple times. Like there's no enforced parity. How do you feel about that versus a more traditional good v evil where you have to play both armies that I've seen?
I mean, I I don't know about Dad, but I personally am not a huge fan of good v evil in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just better to go with an army that you're confident in, and then just have the opportunity to play it against any other army. But I think I like the ability to sort of choose um sort of which good v evil you're doing and which army you're playing. Because in other good v evil games, you'll tournaments rather, you'll see sort of a preset thing where you'll go good one round, evil another round, good, then
Mm-hmm.
evil. And then that can cause some serious situations where if you are if you are first place and say somebody else is second place and you're going into last round, you won't play because you guys both have good coming up. And that sort of takes away sort of the competitive integrity, in my opinion, of those sorts of tournaments. So I think being able to, so for those of you who don't know, the system we're describing is basically you and your opponent appear at the table, you roll off, the person who rolls higher picks um, whether they will be playing good or evil, and then the opponent um, then takes the opposite force. Say Rob and I are playing,
Mm-hmm.
I win the roll off, I say I will play evil, Rob is then forced to play good. And that's basically the system. Um, and it also allows you to only bring one army. And basically what happens there is if you bring one army, then your opponent can pick which army they will play against you, either good or evil. So I think sort of from a fairness perspective and a balance perspective, I like that system better
Mhm.
than
Yeah.
just flat out preset.
I mean, one thing it does also is it kind of it does create at least somewhat of a check on the killer armies, because there's at least a 50% chance you won't get to use it. I mean, unless the other guy happens to have brought a list that he thinks is a good counter to your killer army and chooses that one. I mean, with that said, I mean, the top 3 players at this tournament, I mean, Evan won and had used his evil army 3 times. The guy that came in second had used Assault on Lothlorien 2 or 3 times. And then I was hanging in third and I had used Assault on Lothlorien twice.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how good a check. I mean, we're still seeing an evil dominance in US armies, at least at the tournaments that we're going to. So, but it is nice to be able to go to a tournament, and it wouldn't necessarily even need to be a good evil army, but even if you just were like, yeah, you can bring 2 lists, right? And then you can just decide when you see who your opponent is, you each secretly pick which list you want to take against them. So you can have, a list designed to counter, Assault on Lothlorien or Goblin Town or whatever the flavor of the month is, and then another list that is better designed to take on your typical good list with like elves with high fight value heroes or something like that, and you can choose between them. I mean, good v evil is kind of a good way to kind of get kind of more themed games going.
Mhm.
But I think the ability to have more than one list to draw from at a tournament is another way to kind of get out of the dynamic that nobody wants to be in, which is, your scenarios, you've brought your list, you see your opponent, the scenario assigns to you, and you realize you're dead. And you can at least get away from that. The tournament we went to at Mythicos also had a veto system. So that also kind of helped with that. But anything we can do in running tournaments to get away from that dynamic of, the guy has the paper to your rock in the scenario that's assigned to you is good.
It's definitely
Yeah.
never fun to feel helpless in a game.
Right.
For
So
sure.
Rob, you've got a tournament coming up.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
first off, yeah, I was just gonna sort of piggyback on what you were saying, Dad, and I was actually thinking the exact same thing that you were about the whole, we should try a tournament where you can bring 2 armies, doesn't have to be good and evil, and you effectively write down which army you want to play against your opponent. Your opponent does the same, and then you basically reveal it, and then you play the army you revealed against the army your opponent revealed. And I think it adds a layer of strategy to the game that's not too confusing for people to understand. And it also, as you said, prevents that sort of problematic aspect of showing up with your army. You see your opponent's army and go, okay, I guess I lost. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting concept. I wonder if people would just use that to say, okay, I'm going to build one army that's really good at objectives with a lot of numbers, and one that's really good at killing stuff with all the elite heroes, and pick based on the scenario rather than the opponent. But I don't think that's necessarily bad either, right?
I think that needs to be compounded with the veto system, and with a veto system like that was set up at the tournament we went to, which wasn't the 3 similar scenarios, but was instead a smattering of different scenarios in order to prevent that from happening.
Well, maybe the way that it works is that you pick your army first before the scenario is revealed, veto or not. So
Yes,
you're basically looking at your 2 potential
Yeah.
opponents on your opponent's side and saying, what do I think would be best against either of the 2 opponent armies? But yeah, definitely an interesting concept. Yeah. Cool. I like it. Yeah, so I, tentatively have a couple events on the near term docket that that are crucially local so that I can get to them without too much fuss, because there's a lot of events I'd love to go to, but I don't always have, the freedom to drive or fly to them for if they're just too far away. So all of these events that you're talking about, I would love to be a part of, but it's just not practical for me to get away for a day like that, with the drives. But these are local. The first one is kind of an interesting one. So apparently there's a element where you can donate to charity, basically. So it's a quasi charitable event. But the catch is that if you choose to do so, you can essentially, pay to win. You can buy extra wounds and fate for your heroes, and that sounds really fun to me, because I don't think I could pass up the opportunity to get my man Boromir of Gondor the first fate he's ever seen on the tabletop, for example. Now it is limited to one boost per hero, right? So you can't just like take one hero and give him +5 wounds and +5 fate, because that would obviously be ludicrous.
Can you boost each one of the things? You can give them 1 might, 1 will, and 1 fate.
No, it's just a wound and just a fate. And there's it's a 650 point tournament. You pay your regular entry fee for like the regular tournament, and then on the side you can effectively donate to this charity, which as far as I understand it is it's a friend of the tournament organizers runs it, something like that. And I think it's
wait a minute. The charity is a friend of the tournament organizer.
Well, the charity is run by a friend of the tournament organizer. Otherwise, it's a racket, not a charity. Right?
I was going to say.
I think it's called like
you can donate money to my friend,
right? Exactly. Like just put it in this unmarked lockbox, right, on your way out.
That's right.
It's called, I believe, the Extra Life Foundation. I haven't done any homework to make sure it's legit, but I'm choosing to believe. But yeah, so
it's not the Extra Wound and Fate Foundation.
Well, it might as well be, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of fun. So I haven't settled on anything, but I would love to do like Denethor, Hurin, Fellowship, Boromir, all with an extra wound and fate, and like Madril with an extra wound and fate. Because why not, right? At that point, just go for all of them. And then
if you're gonna get an extra fate, wouldn't you want it to be on somebody that could re-roll that fate?
Imagine Gullivar with an extra wound and fate.
Well, and that's the zaniness, right? So you could approach it
five
two
attacks.
Ways. You could take someone that's already miserable, right? To
Dad,
fight against
scratch out all of our plans. I'm going to that tournament and I am bringing Gullivar.
Change of plans, right?
That's right. With 6 attacks on the charge.
6 attacks on the charge.
But like
and a fate in case he gets hit by an insta-kill effect.
Right. Círdan, for that sake. Like any squishy hero or any mega hero suddenly got that much more terrorizing. And
Círdan loves that.
Yeah, it would just be, it's a really kind of fun, zany concept that that is probably going to be broken as hell on the tabletop when you run into the Gullivars and that kind of thing. And I don't know how competitively minded people are approaching it, but it seems fun. So, and it's an excuse to play. And then the other one is a little bit further out, but it's a new group that just started out and they're running their first event, and they're trying to run an event that is both, serious and friendly to new players. And so for that one, I was thinking of taking something that I think is conceptually cool, but would never be stupid enough to take to a real competitive event. So something like an Eomer's Riders, right? Where I'd love to see it on the tabletop just because it's a cool scene from the movies and I have it accessible. But, why would I ever take that to an event unless it was more of a kind of a casual or a intro friendly environment? I haven't settled on that either, but the idea of rocking up with like Angmar and noob crushing is probably the wrong way to go about it. So
I'm sorry.
What do you mean, Rob? I don't understand.
I'm still fixing on the extra wound and extra fate, and now I'm thinking Rangers, right?
Rangers of Ithilien?
No, the Rangers.
Dunedain.
The Dunedain. Oh my god!
just dump like $1,000 into the charity.
Here's $100 check, and here's my army of 2 wound, 2 fate Rangers.
Oh, man, that light bulb did not go off for me until just now, and I don't think I can turn it off.
Yeah, that's right.
Run the Gray Company and give everybody extra wounds and fate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's gonna be insane. Luckily it's insanity for a good cause as opposed to just insanity so that we can all be, you know, masochists. But
Yeah, and I'm also still trying to figure out who would win in the face-off between the 5 wound 1 fate Gullivar and then the 4 wound 4 re-rollable fate Galadriel, Lady of Light. That would be an interesting one too.
oh man, could you imagine taking like
imagine
Vanquishers?
imagine
Oh,
giving
God, yes.
imagine giving Thror another fate point. He's never gonna take a wound ever.
Ever, never, ever, ever, right? So yeah, I mean, it's almost you're spoiled for choice at that point for what kind of absolute, you know, nastiness you can come up with.
Oh,
I'll
or
probably keep
also
it semi-tame.
or also the bird flapping around with the bird, but the bird bath list. So
Uh-huh.
Gwei here with
4 points of
Galadriel's
fate.
mirror with 4
Lovely.
wounds and 4 points of fate. Kill me now.
Oh man, I'm starting to think that this is a horrible idea.
I
Here
love
I
how
am
they
taking a list.
they made it wounds and fate too, because they're like, oh, giving the might and will would just be too broken. Let's do wounds and fate. No one
Right?
could possibly break that.
Oh man,
Let's figure
so
out how
here
to
I was
break
thinking
that.
I was
Yeah.
just gonna take a gun to a gunfight, but I think I'm taking a gun to like a Patriot missile fight, right?
Oh,
Like
wait,
a cruise missile show off.
wait. Now we have 2 wound ring wraiths.
Yeah.
Oh
What
yeah.
happens when they run out of will? How does that work? Do they lose 1 wound? Do they lose all of their wounds?
Oh, I'm taking Black Riders.
Yeah,
Too many
well,
options.
and then
Oh,
and
God.
not only that, but you also have the they have the Hobbit ring wraiths. So they have 2 wounds before they go poof, and when they
Oh,
come back, do they have
no.
both wounds back?
I think so. I think that it
Yeah.
carries for the whole
Yeah.
game. So. Yeah. Now, I mean, I can't 100% commit because I am going on vacation and coming back like a day or two before that. So, you know, lots of things can still happen. But I thought it was pretty fun. So hopefully I'll be able to come up with something insane and go broke trying to buy all of my heroes, all of the stat upgrades.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh man, now I want to do Grey Company though. You've ruined this for me. Or like Breaking of the Fellowship.
Yeah, or
only
or the
600 points, but who cares? They all have extra wounds and fate.
or the Black Riders.
Or the Black Riders or the Vanquishers. Like now I want to do all hero.
Yep.
Because that sounds insane in all the right ways.
Yep. Fair enough.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, so that's what I've got coming up in the near term, and then next year is next year, and we'll start the season over with all the cool tournaments. So hoping to make it to a few of the majors this year, like Adepticon and some of those bigger ones, but we'll see.
So well, on that subject of tournaments in the next year, so I finally been able to kind of clear my commitments for Captain Con. So Shadow and the E6 will be running the weekend of, well, it's going to be February 4th and February 5th, the Saturday and Sunday, and that's going to be at Captain Con up in Warwick, Rhode Island. And
Cool.
We're going to be doing it's the same kind of competitive / narrative tournament. We're going to be doing a different format this year. So for this format, it's going to be the same type of thing where we have, different boards are going to be the battlefields in Middle Earth. Same type of thing where we're doing 6 games, 6 different scenarios. They're probably going to be revamped scenarios where I'm going to take a hand at something I've been threatening to do for a while and take the scenarios that they've written up and modify them so that you basically have in addition to the set victory conditions, you have a Chinese menu of victory conditions that the players can select for basically 1/3 of the tournament points. So that you have some options depending on what the army matchups are to decide kind of what some of those victory points are. And we're also going to be using, I think for the first time this year, we're going to be basically using preset armies. So this is not going to be a tournament where you need to bring, you're going to design your tournament army with all of its gimmicks and bring it. This is going to be an army. This is going to be a tournament where you show up. You're going to join a team, either good or evil, and the armies will be there. and they will be the armies of the various folks that are playing. So we're going to have the Erebor board that's going to have, you know, probably the new Easterlings facing off against the Iron Hills Dale Alliance on, you know, one side, and that's going to be set. And you know, those two armies or variants of those armies, which will change over time, are going to be fighting on those boards. And you know, players can kind of rotate between the boards. So this is your chance to try out a whole bunch of different armies. If you're new, and you know, if you're an experienced player, this is a chance to go and kind of play the game as kind of it was intended to be, as an experience, instead of you know, as kind of a, this is my way to build a better mousetrap type of situation, and you know, really kind of get into the spirit of the movies, and you know, take a,
Don't worry, Dad. I'll figure out a way to build a mousetrap out of this.
yeah, except I'm building the mousetraps. So yeah, so you know, take the, you know, so this is going to be, you know, taking the stereotypical Gondor army against the stereotypical Mordor army, and just see how it goes, and then go on. And now we're squaring off, and we're fighting you know, Rohan versus Isengard, and now we're going to square off, and it's going to be the fiefdoms against you know, Harad, and you have a chance to kind of do all of those throughout the tournament. So that's going to hopefully the way it's going to work.
Yeah,
So,
count me in. That sounds awesome. I love it. I absolutely love it.
so put on your calendars. It's already up on the Captain Con webpage, so tickets are up there. But I have yet to put out the announcement on the various Facebook pages, but that's going to go up soon.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure that we promised a short and gave an episode at this point.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Thank you all for listening to an unexpected podcast shorts. It looks like it's been almost an hour at this point.
Perhaps it's our mediums format.
Yeah,
which seems very very fitting for us, I'd say.
an unexpected
want it to go
podcast,
any other way.
relatively short.
An unexpected podcast where you literally don't know what you're gonna get. So, and apparently,
I hope you guys got something out of our weird tournament ramblings. I hope you were inspired by whatever the hell Rob's next charity tournament is going to be.
Yeah, and post some recommendations in the
things.
comments too. I'd love to see. I'd love to hear what you would want me to play, both at the crazy pay for stats tournament and at the, you know, noob friendly one. So put it in the comments.
And actually, you know what we will do? If you put in a list, if you want to submit lists for next time, that have you know, the extra wound and extra fate, and what we will do is we'll look through those, and we'll come up with what we think are the like the top 2 or 3 examples of those, and that'll be our list review for next time. We'll be going over which we think are the top 2 or 3 lists for this charity tournament
that really like maximize the crazy for that. Yeah.
How many points is it, just so people know?
So it's a 650 point event, and it won't matter if you're doing just theoretical lists, but I think it's $10 a wound and $5 a fate. So there is a monetary incentive to not bring all hero, at least. But
yeah, but
I would rather pay to win.
Rob is made of money, so go ahead and spend his money with Wild Abandon.
Imagine taking Rangers and paying, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and then not even winning the tournament.
Oh my god!
I know you'd manage
horrible.
It, Rob. Oh, you know what? It'd be worth every penny.
Yeah, even with an extra wound and fate, I don't know if the Rangers have what it takes when the things they're coming up against also have extra wounds and fate. But
there's only one way to find out.
There's only one way to find out. Luckily, at 650, it's not that many Rangers, right? If you're taking Grey Company and taking some real heroes with them. But
yep.
Anyway,
right,
so
this sets the record for the longest outro ever. We'll see you guys next episode.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody.